an hour on Talk Sport and Talk Radio. Maybe you're way ahead of me, but normally around this time of year, lots of us try and take stock. We think about our lives and we think about maybe what we might want to change for the new year, because the new year is almost upon us. What is it, 3 weeks away? And we have had one heck of a terrible year behind us. Unforgettable, but also, for many of us, unrepeatable, almost unforgivable. So if you do want to change things, the way you work in the world, the way you proceed in the world, maybe even the way you are in your own family, have I got the book for you? I've just put it down on the desk. I don't care anymore. I'm going to do what I like, because I've read a book by a man called Keith Fraser. That's Fraser with an S, called Cojones. You heard me right. On the front cover is a finger pointing right at me, and then at you when I hold it up to the microphone. Cojones, grow a pair for success. And the author, Keith G. Fraser, joins us now on Talk Sport and Talk Radio. Good morning, Keith. How you doing, matey?
I'm doing very well, Paul. How are you?
Very well indeed. Now, it's a kind of cheeky title, and I was talking to one of my daughters about it yesterday, and I should point out it's cojones in like the more slang sense of the word, so it applies to women as well as men, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You know what? It's funny, I've done talks in front of an audience, and I've said to a mixed audience, said, stand up and point your cojones. And you'd be surprised how many women stand up and point downwards. I'm thinking, what? No. You've got to point to your skull. You put it in between your ears, because it's a mindset. It is an absolute mindset. And you find that anybody who's anybody in this world, be they Steve Jobs, obviously, God rest his soul, Alexander Graham Bell, all the other people who've done amazing things in life, be that in politics, be that in sport, be that in business, they've all had a pair. They've all had cojones to go further, to step out of their comfort zone and do, and cut out all the outside noise, be that from society, from family, from friends, who say, oh, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that. No, they've gone for it, they've done it, and here we are talking about them now.
Now, you've got all kinds of quotes inside the book, towards the end, wise quotes that inspire a cojones mindset, but you've got a great quote on the front page, okay? Now, I know you're very involved in the world of tennis, as well as being a businessman, successful businessman down the years, because you do a podcast, I think it's called Rock and Roll Tennis with John Lloyd. But
I do.
You've got a quote on the front, though. Keith is certainly true to his message of audacity and perseverance. Arsene Wenger. Now, did you break into his house late one night and force him to say that? How did you get the book to him, and why did he say that? Well, have you worked with Wenger then?
Well, no. I'll tell you what, actually, listen, this is actually part of the cojones story. In fact, one of the things that I did in the book is identify my own, or some of them, cojones icons. People who've done things in different walks of life and used their cojones in different areas. And one of them was Arsene Wenger. I always wanted to interview that man. I'm a big Arsenal fan myself. And as it happens, I'm a strong believer. I've been in sales before, so I understand what it takes to sell and always go to the decision maker. And I'm pretty damn sure, Paul, that you've got an agent, but I never like to go to agents because they're the gatekeepers. You have to go to the man who makes the decisions. So I actually managed to get his number. I phoned him up with a lot of persistence some year and a half ago, and we ended up doing a fantastic charity event together in North London for a child bereavement charity that was is very close to my heart, Grief Encounter. And following on from that, I kind of, kept in contact. And if you like, persistence and audacity has enabled me to get him to say, yeah, go for it. This is what, I'm happy to put my name to it. And there have been others as well in the book, as you know. Alistair Campbell was kind enough to give a few words.
Even Judge Rinder.
Well, yeah, Judge Rinder, yeah, indeed. And I interviewed him, and one of the things that he said, because one of the things about cojones is about, being audacious, being cheeky. And one of the words that I've used in specifically something about Judge Rinder, he's got what is known as chutzpah. You probably know what that word means.
Yeah. It means front.
Yiddish,
basically, you've got the
Yiddish word for absolutely ridiculous cheek, Paul. I'm sure you've got it to get where you've been in your fantastic career.
It makes up for my lack of cojones.
Well, no, but the truth is, and Judge Rinder made a fantastic quote. He said to me, I was thinking about it, Keith. He said, I always wonder how I could explain to someone what chutzpah means. He goes, I suppose it's a bit like killing your parents and claiming a family estate. Now, that's a bit of an extreme version.
Ouch.
But sometimes you have to be a bit extreme and maybe a little bit tongue-in-cheek, as I am with the book, to get your point over.
Well, that's it. It's quite provocative at times, and a couple of things stuck out for me I wanted to quiz you about. One is you say, and I kind of get the point, you say no one's ever achieved great things by being the same as everyone else. You mentioned revolutionary businessman Steve Jobs, you mentioned Tony Blair, Maggie Thatcher, top guitarists like Eric Clapton, Slash, or Angus Young. Does that mean then that you can't really follow the rules in this book because you need to be your own. But how do we find out who we are, what we can offer that's unique to the world then, Keith?
Well, here's the thing: we are all unique, and the thing is, when we're born, when we're kids, we all have these dreams to be or to do something, and of course they are hampered by society's messages, family's messages, peer messages, but despite the fact they're friends and so forth, because we learn something through conditioning. We learn how to be just for the purpose of being well behaved for society. But you tend to find the people who want to step out of the comfort zone to be different from the others, or even be themselves, have to have an element of shaking that criticism off. I come from a family of shoulders. They're always shoulding on me. And I realise now that is very hindering. And we live in a world that's full of frustration.
That's why that song was so true. Shoulda, woulda, coulda are the last words of a fool.
Well, exactly, Paul. Unless you want to, perhaps you want to give us a few chords or a few bars.
Maybe not. I am to music what Woodrot is to Pinocchio, sadly. But I take your points on that. And the other fascinating thing about this is, some of the quotes at the end. Coincidentally, I've just finished a book compiled by Bruce Lee's daughter, and there's a quote in the book at the end for these wise quotes that is a Bruce Lee classic. Defeat is not defeat unless accepted as a reality in your own mind. And the chapter in the book that I think may well strike home to people, and I'm talking, folks, to Keith G. Fraser, all through the book Cojones, Grow a Pair for Success, published by Panoma, is the chapter about what you do when, I won't use the F word, failure, but when things haven't worked out as you wanted them to, how you get back on that horse. Because that's vital to what you talk about in the book, isn't it? Having the minerals to try again.
It is. I don't quite remember the quote. I'm a big fan of the Rocky movies. By the way, you mentioned Slash and Angus Young there. I'm a big fan of those bands, and they're different, But yes, one of the things about, and Nelson Mandela said it, but one of the things that Sylvester Stallone says in the Rocky movies, it's not about how hard you get hit. It's about, I think he said something along the lines of getting up after you get hit. Yeah. And that is what it's about. And I know from my own experience, listen, I am not somebody who can profess to be ballsy all the time. I do have a number of these qualities, and I do strongly believe in the messages in the book, but I am not like that all the time. And of course, it's a constant, we're constantly working on ourselves and constantly striving. And this book really goes into detail about how we can constantly strive for that. Because like I said, Paul, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, in the world we live today, there are so many people frustrated, depressed and so forth. If they were to literally tear off the shackles, stick two fingers up at convention, if you don't mind me saying, and with themselves, did what they want to do, say what they want to say, be what they want to be, not walk on eggshells, the place would actually be happier. People would be more authentic. And that's the crux of the book, And
it works on relationships as well. There's a chapter on that in the book. I'm reminded of another quote you use from Babe Ruth. It's hard to beat a person who never gives up. Now, you've mentioned you're an Arsenal fan, and we won't hold that against you, no. But I understand you're quite interested in proper professional sport as well, like tennis. Tell us about your John Lloyd podcast. I'm only saying that because you're not in the studio with me, because he's also a black belt in Taekwondo. So I'd be very careful if he was here with the flesh with me. So how did that come about? What do you and John Lloyd get up to on the tennis podcast?
Well, I love the game of tennis. I'm into all sports, and tennis for me is the ultimate non-contact gladiatorial sport. And, I met John through a friend of mine here. And particularly, we were talking about it for a while, and since the lockdown, we decided, look, let's just get on with it. And we've been putting out some, which I think is great content. I think it's going to be released tomorrow, Tuesday. We've got Tim Henman on the show. We've had Andrew Castle, Pat Cash, and it's just going from strength to strength. I love talking to John about, he's got some great stories about his career, about how he almost literally drowned in the bath in the changing room at Wimbledon. Changing rooms at Wimbledon. That is, he talks about that. He's talked about how all sorts of things about needing the toilet in the commentary box at Wimbledon. All sorts of fantastic stories, and it's a magazine style.
I know he interviews Cojones icons for it, doesn't he? People like, I think Ross Kemp's been on it, Chris Eubank, again Nigel Farage turned up on it.
Nigel Farage, yeah, because that's another, in a chapter in the book, I said you need to identify who your icons are, and it doesn't really matter who they are. It's non-political. What it is, by identifying some people, we all have, and we should have, some people we look up to, people we would like to have a bit of. Growing up, many of them were sports stars for me. In fact, you talk about Bruce Lee. He is probably my all-time idol. But, you know, if you look at icons, they've all done different things. So I managed to track down people like David Walsh, who was responsible for bringing down almost single-handed, but not quite, Lance Armstrong. So he had cojones for integrity, for speaking out. People like Nigel Farage, who had a vision. He was utterly convinced of this vision about Brexit.
And that's the thing, whether you agree with the politics or not, it's that purity of intent you talk about. Because another great quote in the book, and again, I've read this before, but it's from W.M. Lewis. The tragedy of life is not that it ends so soon, but that we wait so long to begin it. And I think a lot of people after this last year, with a new year on the way, might be thinking, we've almost lost a year, we've wasted a year, let's change things in our lives. And I think this is the book to do it, Keith.
Well, it's very kind of you to say, Paul. Look, I can only say from my own personal experience. Look, when I was a kid, my father died when I was 14, and I can tell you that had a profound effect on me. And it took me many years to understand how I ticked, how I understood myself. And, of course, it enabled me all these years later to realise, well, hang on a minute. Instead of worrying about tomorrow or thinking about the past, as the old adage says, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, and today is a gift. That's why they call it a present. So I think if we can all take that message and, of course, go for it, be unapologetic, live authentically and fearlessly. I don't fear anyone. Of course, I have fears, but I don't fear anyone. But if we live those rules in our life, I think all of us will be happier. But you can't change the world. You can only change yourself. But if you can start from there, I think people will be a lot happier, don't you?
I certainly do, and that's why it's not the kind of book, to be absolutely honest, I would normally read, because, we read a lot of non-fiction for this show. This is non-fiction, but it's also incredibly motivational, folks. I wanted to end with your acronym in the book for fear, which is false expectations appearing real. Again, something we could all absorb. Keith, you've been a fantastic guest. You must come back on again, mate, and bring John Lloyd with you next time.
I would love to. Oh, well, listen, we'd love to. I'm sure John would love to. He lives in Florida, but we always manage to find time to record. I'm sure he'd love to speak to you. Are you a tennis fan, Paul?
Ish. I mean, I prefer my football, but you obviously don't. How did you make your boys? I haven't seen the results. How do they do in that North London derby at the weekend? How do they get on against Tottenham?
I think you have. I think you have. We lost 2-0, mate. Who's your team, by the way?
The Happy Hammers. We got humped by poor old Man United, but we know our place. Listen, Keith, you've been a fantastic guest, mate. We will talk again. Have a very merry holidays and Christmas. The book is called Cojones. Cojones by Keith G. Fraser. Fraser with an S. Published by Panoma Press, and the subtitle is Grow a Pair for Success. And you heard that interview right here on TalkSport and Talk Radio.